Hello, Vapian here with a video that I actually did not set out to make, but due to some experiences that I had recently, I thought it was information worth sharing. About a month ago, I started using tank systems, which was a great addition to my vaping arsenal. Just real long vape times on a cartomizer, how can you go wrong? What I started out with was this. It's called the J-Tank. It's available from electronicsticks.com for about $20. What you get for that is just the tank, the tube body and the caps with the O-rings on them. Now, something I would like to point out about this is if you take a look, you can see what appears to be a couple of black lines drawn into it. What that actually is the O-ring on the cap squeezing up against the inside of this polycarbonate body. Now, if you take a look at that, that's a pretty hefty wall thickness for that polycarbonate tube. When you put that cap in there, the O-ring squeezes up against the inside, makes it look like a black line is there. It's just a great indication that you've got a good seal there and that any liquid you have inside is not going to get outside. Now, as others have pointed out in other reviews, it works with standard punched or slotted 510 cartomizers, and when you first fill it, it can be a little slidey, meaning that the liquid sort of lubricates between the cartomizer and the O-ring, allows it to spin a little bit or slide a little bit. As long as you're careful about that, you shouldn't have any problems. One of the things I do to provide sort of a lock in one direction is to use a mouthpiece like this Ming mouthpiece, and that just keeps me from pushing the cartomizer out from the mouthpiece end. And being aware of that slidiness issue when you first fill it, I haven't had any problems with this in the field. Once I've got it filled and I let it sit for a while to let the O-ring seal up against the cartomizer, it's worked great for me. But at $20 a pop, getting one or two is probably okay, but having quite a few more for different flavors, I've been kind of putting that off for a little bit. Recently, SmokTech has come out with this. They're calling this the 510 Dual Coil Tank Cartomizer, I believe, and it's available from a number of different vendors. And this is actually a great bargain in the vaping world. For $12, you get the tank with the caps, you get a cartomizer, and you get a mouthpiece. And there's some great things about this. I like this mouthpiece. It's a little bit longer than the average 510 mouthpiece, so it lets me get some tooth on it when I want to. It fits very tightly, almost too tightly at first. Once you get it in and out a few times, it loosens up, but at first, give it a little bit of a lick there and it goes back in much more easily. The cartomizer itself is actually a great little performer. Now, as it comes, it's got one tiny hole in it. And now I say it's tiny. It is smaller than is effective for me. I found that even with 80-20 liquid, I could out-vape how quickly that hole could keep the cartomizer wet. So I could dry out the cartomizer pretty quickly. I put a bigger hole in there. Next time around, I'll probably slot it. Either way, I made the opening bigger, and that drastically improved the performance of the cartomizer for me. And just to give you an idea of how well it performs just on a standard 3.7 volt device, excellent vapor. So, plenty for me. I love the way that thing performs. What I potentially have issues with is the tank itself. This one has worked great for me. I've used it in the field, I've refilled it several times and didn't have any issues at all with it. This one, I've had a couple of issues with it, and I'm pretty sure I know what the reason is. Remember the J-Tank? Looks like it's got lines drawn in it when the caps are installed because the O-rings are squeezing up against the inside of the tank body. Now you take a look at the J-Tank, there are some lines there, but they're pretty darn thin, and in fact on one end here you can almost see gaps where there's a line, maybe it's this one here, where the line sort of seems to just go away. These caps themselves are not as thick, so they don't seat as deeply into the tank, and the tank itself much thinner walled, and this one you can actually squeeze and deform it, whereas the other one you can't do that. The walls are just too thick. So you've got this flexible thin tube, which does the trick most of the time, but you know, this is a variable. You've got this cap which doesn't sit in quite as deep, and its O-rings definitely do not seal against the tank as firmly as they do in my other tanks. Now, as long as they seal well enough, as long as they stay in place, as they have with this one here, then it's enough. It's a good thing, and that makes this a great bargain. However, my experience has been a little bit different than that. On the tank itself, this one does have bottom and top caps. They're not identical. The one for the bottom has a little recess cut into it, which is designed to hold the flange, which is on this cartomizer. Most cartomizers don't have this flange, but what that does is that allows the cartomizer to fully seat in one direction, and the tank cannot be pushed off of it, which is a great feature. So that definitely gives these tanks an orientation, or the caps I should say. Now this bottom cap on this particular one works great. When the cartomizer goes in, you know, there's enough pull from the O-rings on there, and pulling the cartomizer out does not do anything to this particular cap. Now for the top cap, it's a little different. You put the cartomizer in there, and when I pull it out, at the very least it unseats somewhat. Varies from time to time. You're looking at probably 2 millimeters this time. If I seat that back in there, give it another pull, that's about 2.5. I've had it actually completely come out on me before, and that's why I decided to do this video. Basically, the process of filling is one where you have to pull the cartomizer down from the bottom, bringing the top down into the tank so that you can drip in there or insert a syringe to fill it. And what I found was happening to me was when I would fully seat this cartomizer up in there, right when the top of the cartomizer would hit the O-rings, it would push the cap out of the tank. In fact, on 2 occasions for me, it actually popped this completely off of there, and I ended up losing about 2 or 2.5 mils each time of liquid on my workbench, on me, on my batteries. And that's why I wanted to make this video, was to simply point out that while this is actually a great bargain, $12 tank cartomizer, it's got the flange on it, you can't push it down, a good mouthpiece with it, it performs well, it is a great bargain in the vaping world. But I think there are quality control issues. Out of the 2 tanks that I have, I've got one that I didn't have any issues with, and I've got this one here that I had issues with when filling. Now, I can say that once I was in the field with it, once I had it filled and have it put together, especially if I go ahead and use a large-bodied mouthpiece on there, which provides a lock on the top as well as the one for the flange on the bottom, out in the field, this works great. During filling, that cap basically comes off way too easy, in my opinion, on this one. So it's a quality control thing. I don't know whether the diameter of this cap is a little small, or the O-ring may be out of spec, or maybe it has something to do with this flexible tube. Maybe its diameter's kind of big. I'm not really sure. But the problem is real, the problem is there. And the question is does this make this a wave-off item? No, I don't think it does. Again, for $24, you can buy 2. I definitely recommend, if you do buy these, buy 2. That way, if you do run into a problem with one, you'll still have another one that will work while you get a refund or exchange on the other. This is really just something to be aware of. And now that I am aware of this, I handle it differently. I definitely make sure that when I am working with it at all, while there's liquid in there, I've got a finger on the top and the bottom. And since I've started doing that, I haven't had any problems because the tank doesn't come apart. And once there's liquid in there, it seems to seal pretty well. And again, between that bottom flange and using a larger mouthpiece on the top, I can kind of lock it together. What I wanted to do was let others know that this had happened to me, so that you can be aware of this when you first get one of these, because I definitely recommend getting them. It's just a quality control, a consistency issue that I think means, at least at first, when you're getting used to this thing, definitely be careful. Definitely pay attention to how firmly those caps fit inside this tube, how well it all fits together, whether you're getting a good seal, and especially when you're filling, be careful and make sure that you're paying attention and don't create a situation for yourself where this cap comes off. Beyond that, like I say, it performs great. It's actually made me feel better about having kept some of these old Ego batteries around, and my Pure Smoker Icon, my 3.7 volt non-variable voltage or power devices, because it's very useful on there. It performs well. With 5 mils of liquid, this is basically at least 3/4 of a day or a full day of vaping for me. It's wonderful. Just be careful with it. Just be aware of that potential for the cap to come off at a time when you're not paying attention while there's liquid in there. Don't create a situation where you can end up wasting liquid, having to clean things up. SmokTech Dual Coil 510 Tank Cartomizer. I recommend it with the caveats that I mentioned before. That's all I have for now. I hope this is useful information for you that will keep you from having to go through a whole mess of cleanup like I did. And I look forward to seeing you again here on YouTube later. Take care.